Interracial relationships were taboo in the past, but is slowly becoming a trend. Differing perspectives will cause some to look down on people and these relationships, while others wish they were in an interracial relationship, and more to wonder how the children of mixed heritage will integrate into society. Well, joining me in studio this evening to unpack further details on our topic of discussion is Mr. Tyrone Smith, who's an entrepreneur, alongside Chadia Diamond, who's an Afro expert. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening right here on Africa Tonight. But before we start our discussion right in studio, we're also joined on the phone line by cultural activist Mr. Mangaliso Ngema, alongside with Chuck Vukosi, who's also an entrepreneur. But to actually start the ball rolling, Mangaliso, I will actually start with you, who's also joining us on the phone line. A very good afternoon, or rather good evening to you, Mr. Ngema. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us on Africa Tonight this evening. Now, it's 24 years into democracy in South Africa, but racial tensions still continue, to be an issue, particularly also on interracial couples. What's your take on the perceptions on interracial couples in the country?
Well, interracial couples are that, I don't think that we should gauge our race relations as a nation just based on how many interracial relationships we can find. They've always been there, even during the times of apartheid. People have always married across the color line, whether it was through Swaziland or other countries that didn't have the same laws. But I think race relations and the state that they are in right now a result of, I think, careless politicians, who are finding leverage, in race issues when the real issues are not being dealt with, and they find that people, are moved easily when race is brought into the picture. But I think we have to work together as a nation to address it. I personally I'm very passionate about that. I think race relations need to be dealt with very carefully.
Indeed, Mr. Ngema. Now, mixed race couples, have you also made mention that are still frowned upon by some in the country. What would you say perhaps is to blame towards this reaction or reception from the people in the country?
It has always been something that people not always frown at, but some people frown at it. But it has always been something, worth looking at, because people have, our history and how we have been divided along racial lines. But, even during apartheid, I had friends and we dated across the color line. We dated white girls and that sort of thing. And it wasn't such a big deal. But people will always frown at it because people always wonder who's doing who a favor. And I think that's the unfortunate part, because it seems that for an African person to be in a relationship with a person of European descent, there's a power thing that happens there. In most cases, the Africans will welcome the European partner, whether it's a bride or a groom, graciously and openly. But in many cases, you'll find that the European family is struggling to accept the black partner. So it is a color thing that will always be there, I suppose. But it's not something that we should look at so critically, because if people choose to be married within their culture and within their racial group, that's also fine, because it doesn't mean that if you don't want to be in a mixed relationship, then you have hatred for the other. Loving yourself is also fine. When white parents insist that their children shouldn't marry outside of their racial group, it's also fine. We shouldn't take offense.
And now, how do we as a society actually, work with regards to changing the entire narrative towards interrelations, or rather interracial relationships in the country? What do we do then as a society with regards to rectifying this, especially at grassroots levels?
I think the most important thing is for, maybe government or organizations that work in this space to teach people about the backgrounds that we all come from. I think we are more similar than we are different. We have so many similarities. I mean, black people and white people, we are more similar than we are different, but we tend to focus on our differences more. We are all human. All we want to do is raise our children in a safe and secure environment, provide for our children. That's the primary need for the human. Even animals have that primary instinct. So as humans, that's all we want to do. And I think we are more similar than we are different, and we need to start focusing more on our similarities.
And now, Mr. Ngeme, lastly, before I actually let you go this evening, what's your take on cultural appropriations, which always seem to be, a cloud hanging over these mixed race couples?
How do you mean?
When couples actually have kids and they venture over with raising their kids, which culture then becomes dominant within those relationships? What's your take on that?
Okay, again, we spoke briefly about culture, I think, a week ago, and I for one believe that culture is something that should be chosen by each family unit. This idea of following culture just broadly and confine yourself to cultural norms, which you didn't create, is really outdated. I believe each and every family needs to design what works for them, and culture should be something that works for every family.
Well, Mr. Ngeme, indeed, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening right here on Africa Tonight. But to actually continue this discussion this evening, I still have in studio joining me Mr. Tyrone Smith alongside Mr. Chadia Diamond. Also on the phone line is also joining us is Chuck Vagos, who's also an entrepreneur. And I believe that Chuck and Tyrone Smith are currently in relationships with people of a different race towards them. Just to actually start off, our discussion in studio, just talk us through your experience with regards to being involved with, a woman of a different color to yours.
Well, it's very challenging, but at the same time, it's exciting as well. I get to learn more about their culture, about their tradition, how they understand other traditions, culture, how they tolerate it, how they try their best to understand it, not judge people. So I've learned quite a lot, but at the same time, you always get those people that, of course, grew up in apartheid and they were taught differently with their parents, not to like what the white people do, what the white people have to say. So, it will always be there. You always get people that see different, but I think at the end of the day, it's up to who you are inside to actually determine whether you want to be with this person or not, regardless the color of the skin.
And your take, Mr. Diamond, on this?
Well, probably we need to go back into history as a society and understand that the first major act which was passed was the Immorality Act by the previous regime which was there. So there was a prohibition of interracial marriages. So you'd find out that if people were to date, the police would come and they would get whatever, like lingerie that they would have find there. They would use that in court as evidence, So being in a society like that, it means that there were people who were born illegal. If you look at the likes of Trevor Noah, he speaks so loud about that to say he was from a father who was white and his mother was black, and it was not allowed, you understand? So if you're coming from that society, a lot of things have changed from the old dispensation into the new political, social, and economic dispensation that we are in. So there is a lot now that people need to transform on. But if you look at culture, culture is so rigid. People need, and there's a need for people to say we need to protect our culture. And then now there's new other ideas coming into that culture that people find a little bit difficult to get into.
Well, a very good evening to you, Chuck. I do hope that you can hear me. Chuck is also joining us on the phone line, joining in our discussion this evening. I do hope that you can hear me. Perhaps just give us a brief summary on your experience with regards to dating a different woman of color towards yours. And congratulations on your marriage.
Thank you very much, and a good evening to the viewers. I can hear you, but my network is a bit of a challenge. In terms of my relationship, I do find here and there where we go to places where you do get people looking at you in a weird manner and stuff like that. But overall, I just try to avoid those type of cases. I guess I can tell, being South African, I know which type of crowds to hang around with that would be more understanding and more open towards my relationship with my wife. But nonetheless, it's been an experience and a half. But yes, we're making it work and we're continuing with it, and the family is supportive. So it's an amazing thing.
And now, Mr. Diamond, what's your take with regards to, what would you say is actually to blame with regards to the reception still today? I mean, it's a total different year, a decade, apartheid has since passed on. Why do you think we still have this problem in society?
Well, each and every society, because of its built, because of the roots in a society, you'd find out that currently in the system that we are in, the youth are slowly transforming. Look, currently we have other marriage, people are having same-sex relationships. Those things are coming into now, but the old crop, those who are still, those who are cultured, they still have issues in understanding those things. But you'd find, of course, different pockets trying to come to terms with the reality now. So I think it just depends on how a certain society evolves within a particular context.
Well, we actually are joined on the phone line by a caller calling from Limpopo. Very good evening to you, Benjamin. Thank you so much for joining us. What's your comment for us this evening?
How are you?
Well, very well. Thanks yourself, Benjamin. What's your comment for us this evening?
Yeah, so I'm very glad, man. I'm very glad to see some people marry each one. So that what I can say now, maybe is just that democracy. Democracy is very important.
Well, Benjamin, thank you so much for calling in this evening. Remember that if you also want to join in on our discussion this evening, just give us a call on 011-542-1046. Well, Tyrone, we actually heard Benjamin on the phone line saying that he's actually very glad that interracial relationships have now actually become, accepted in society. However, we still can't turn a blind eye on the jibs that interracial relations or rather couples still get on the streets, especially on social media. I think we've seen with the rugby player Siya Kolisi, he's been very vocal with regards to the reception he's had with regards to his marriage to a white person. Have you experienced any sort of, behavior from people in society that is actually very unsettling?
A couple of times, yes, but I've just gotten over it because I know it will never go away. But it's like one instance, just walking in a shopping mall, you would get one or two people that literally stare at you, but with disgust. They'll even throw comments behind your back, and the one side of me would want to turn around and say something, but at the end of the day, it's not about them, it's about me. And by me ignoring them and moving forward, it's only between the opportunity for interracial couples to try and ignore the fact that people won't really agree with it. But at the end of the day, it's one race, the human race. We all bleed the same blood, we all see the same thing. So yeah, I don't really see...
Now, actually, without interrupting you over there, without actually looking at how society reacts towards mixed-race couples, but there's always an issue of acceptance within families.
Yes.
Now, would you say that you've actually experienced any type of unsettling behavior from your own family members on dating, a different woman of a different skin color to yours?
Okay, well, at first, most people will get a shock, especially for the white parents. Like, when the first time I introduced them to them, they were a bit shocked. But over time, they get to know the person, and they discover that they're the same as me. They're the same as you. They're the same as everybody else. But yeah, my grandparents, they didn't accept it that well because, of their upbringing. So I don't really blame them. I had to just tolerate it. But like I said, over time, they did get over it. They understood the person. They learn to not judge them, to understand the background where they come from. So by now, no one in my family has a problem with it.
Well,
They
Mr.
like
Diamond, I actually saw Mr. Diamond slightly shaking his head over there because it still remains, a very pertinent issue and a very critical issue. Not only acceptance from society, but also, from your immediate family members, from your father, your mother, your friends, your family, your close circle, of people in life. Your take on that? Do you think it is actually that easy for family members to actually accept, their other house?
Specifically focusing on the African context, within the African traditions, you'd find out that when you get married, which is slightly different from the white culture, is that if you get married to a person, you're not just only getting to marry to that person as an individual, but you're actually getting married to the whole family, So you've got different aunts, different uncles coming with all sorts of input into the relationship. For instance, if I'm black, and then I would think that if I'm married to a white person, the assumption, just in general, is that, okay, your grandmother is assuming that the person won't be able to cook. The person won't be able to cook and talk to her because now she has to go and speak in another language, you understand? So you still have those things in the community,
which
especially.
is still lingering.
Yeah, but slowly but surely the community is still transforming.
I actually want us to actually touch on that, but we're also joined by another caller on the phone line from Limpopo. A very good evening to you, Newa. Thank you so much for your time. What's your comment for us this evening? Hello, Newa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
What's your comment for us this evening? Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes. Let me greet everyone there.
Hello, how are you?
Well, you may carry on, Newa. Thank you.
Okay. Really, I like what I see, and then I believe that South Africa, if we can be together like this, black and white, colored, everyone, then be together, then trust me, South Africa will be, or Africa as a whole, will be great. You understand? I know we have got differences when coming to cultures, but trust me, if you can be together like this, love us like this, South Africa will be. Africa will be great.
It is indeed beautiful. Wanewa, thank you so much for calling in on Africa Tonight this evening. But before we actually crossed over to our caller, we were still talking on the issue of cultural differences. I just want to actually let you carry on your point.
So now the issue now of the interference from the families now from the African context, they would say the person won't be able to cook for us, the person won't be able to understand our culture. If we are going to do our traditional stuff, the person won't be able to understand. And so that is still there within certain parts of the culture because people want to protect their culture, you understand? But like what I've mentioned earlier on, that there's been a transformation. If we look at what happened over the weekend, beautiful wedding of the royal family in Europe, they changed. Some of the things changed. They normally would get married during the week, but they got married over the weekend. He also got married to a person of color, and there was an acceptance. It was a beautiful, wonderful wedding which happened over the weekend. So we can probably say the society is slowly transforming.
And now going back to Chuck. Chuck, I still hope that you are still with us this evening. Perhaps just talk us through with regards to experiences, with regards to the important issue of acceptance, not only from society and people around, that you meet occasionally, but from your own family. How has it been? How would you describe it?
With me, I'm from a Christian family which is very open-minded. At first, when I sent my mom a picture of my then girlfriend, now wife, she didn't immediately respond, but at the same time, she didn't say anything negative until to a point where I finally introduced them. In fact, I introduced her to my brothers first, who were very accepting towards her, and then eventually my parents met her, and when they met her, they clicked with her, found out that she's a loving person, a caring person, and from there we never had any issues. And same goes for her family. When she told her mom first about me, her mom was, receiving the news with an open mind, and she never said anything bad. She never rebuked her daughter from the relationship. And more than anything, it is the general public of which, Mr. Smith there was saying, that sometimes when you're out in the public, people do tend to give you looks or make funny comments. With me, it would be mostly my own black people who would make certain comments like, where did you find her? And of which that to me is an otherwise question, as in, what do you mean, where did I find her? This is someone who I came across in life and we managed to click at some level. And from there, we got to know each other and then eventually got into a relationship. But, you know, sometimes like when we'll be walking in the mall, people would give you funny looks to a point where me and my fiancé would even act otherwise in order to like just get some reaction out of them. Like I would act like as if I'm mugging her because people of the way that people would be looking at us so much or staring at us so much. But just to quickly like break that ice, would do certain things just to show them that, you know what, you staring like that is not right. We actually are a couple and we do get along very well. I'm Shangan from Guyana. She's Sikkimese from India. Now, from Sikkim in India. Now, that is two completely different cultures altogether. But
you know, without interrupting you over there, Chuck, we actually want to talk on the issue of cultural differences with you, but let's keep it there for now. We're also joined by another caller from Cape Town, Eric. A very good evening to you, Eric. Thank you so much for calling in on Africa Tonight this evening. What's your comment for us this evening? Hello, Eric. I do hope that you're still with us. Can you hear me? What's your comment for us this evening on Africa Tonight?
No, what I'm trying... I can hear you.
You may carry on, Eric. What's your comment for us?
I just want to say that I say to that guy... I say to that guy that congratulations that... because we also saw what the prince and that lady from America again.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for calling in. I think we are actually experiencing a bit of network problems over there. I couldn't exactly get Eric's point across. But on the issue of cultural differences, do you think that it actually pose, you know, a challenge to your relationship with your partner?
I think that at the beginning of a relationship, it can, because, you know, you guys are not that really in love with each other, and it does take a huge toll on it. It's a lot of pressure. But if you just try and ignore it and focus why you're in the relationship, why you're with the person, you tend to nudge it off, and as time goes on, you just tolerate it.
Now, you also do agree with what Tyrone is actually saying, that cultural differences, you know, in these mixed relations are actually just a small hurdle that any other couple can actually, you know, go over and above.
Yes, love is a beautiful language. And love it does not know any boundaries, color or race, you know. So, but we've got this dynamic of culture which is there. So over and above it being an interracial, you also bring another interesting aspect, which is culture, you know. Just look at it like to say there are also issues with regards to intercultural relationships. A person from Venda it might not be easy for them to get married to someone who is of Zulu origin, you understand, because of the way they do their practices. But then this takes away the fact that love is between two individuals. That's the founding principle. It takes it away. It makes it more of a communal issue now to say the community, the person's community and our community would have to come in and accept. So it brings in a little bit of a barrier in a relationship, but like what is correctly saying that it now zeroes down to between the two partners, what they want and what they have in common. If you look at, for example, we have the issues that the likes of Musima Imane, he's a polymarried, and he's in that relationship, and Kolisi as well. They all have those things. But also, another issue is that it depends with the society. There are certain elements within the society, that different types of societies which accept that. Let's talk about money. The rich and famous is easily acceptable. You slot in nicely. It's like a hand in glove. But if you look at our society, let's say, for instance, in Deep Clove, if you go to Soweto, is that acceptable in Soweto culturally? Those things seldom happen. That's why now people would look at you with that. It's because it's not yet deeply entrenched with that society. But if you are rich, it's easily because you are within a certain framework.
Now, I actually want to rope in Chuck on this particular question. Chuck, would you also agree with what Tyrone and Mr. Diamond are actually saying, that the issue of cultural differences do not actually pose that much of a difference in mixed couple relations? As you've made mention that you are married to a Sekamese girl and you are a black African man yourself.
Yes, I mean, with the relationship, the way I look at it is that we built on what we started off with. The family and the culture then comes after, in the sense of when we meet as individuals, I'm not looking at your customs at that moment. I'm looking at what I see and what I feel, so to say. And the customs of your culture come on as I get to know you more. Now, if I've already had some level of comfort with you, I get to, so to say, be willing to learn your customs, and you are then willing to learn my customs. So in that sense, I never had such barriers. We never had cultural barriers of any sort, because we clicked from get-go in terms of our open-mindedness and in terms of being driven in life and how we view the world as well. So we never had such barriers at all.
And now, Mr. Diamond, posing a question over to you. Would you say that there is, a certain formula or a way that society can actually adopt with regards to, enforcing the acceptance of color? What can we do as society to actually change this entire narrative, especially from young kids? As admittedly, the couples have said that they are still looked upon, frowned upon by some people. But how do we move away from this?
It's not, I don't think it's a question of actually moving away from it, because there's a contestation of power, there's a contestation of space. Culture, there's the one notion, one school of thought which says we need to protect and preserve our culture. And this is another also school of thought which says we need to adapt with the times. You understand? So if you've got those two extreme sides, so I think it's an issue of trying to bring in a little bit of balance between the two, because you can't have an extreme of one end, because then you'd probably, for instance, then totally ignore culture. You need to deal away with culture. But you can't also be deeply entrenched in culture, because you'd also need to change with the world as a fast developing country. So I think it's an issue of balancing the two.
And what would you say, what tools can we use with regards to assisting and changing, the entire narrative, but still at the same time preserving our culture? For instance, media. What do you say are some of the tools that could be, be used, in this certain instance?
Social integration is very important. It is very important for the society to be educated, for the non-governmental organizations, for the government as well to take part into this and educate people to say, yes, we might be different in terms of color, but after all is said and done, we are a rainbow nation. We are one Africa. We are one nation. So we need to unite. And these things are acceptable in society. Like, so far we've been doing good in terms of the same-sex marriages and the rights which are given to such, So I believe the society is going towards the good direction in terms of having those rights which are entrenched in the Constitution, in absolving them.
And now, apart from the rights that Mr. Diamond is actually, mentioning, since the end of apartheid, we've seen, mixed relations becoming more and more acceptable in the country, and actually not being frowned upon as much. Would you say that the government has to some sort of way introduced certain campaigns, whether at grassroots levels, whether it's schools, to actually change this narrative?
Definitely.
What's your take on that?
I think they are doing it, but I think they need to do more of it. They need to create more campaigns where all race is involved in it, putting the project together. I think by doing that, we all helping each other out. We all understanding each other. We can learn each other's traditions, cultures. I think the government has a huge role to play, actually.
And your take, Mr. Diamond?
In today's paper, we've mentioning the government. In today's paper, the Afro Voice, on page 3, there's an issue of a couple which was seeking recognition. The names, they've been writing to the Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Maleso Gigaba. You understand? So this is just one couple. There's a South African and an American lady. You understand? They've been married, but now there's no recognition of the other spouse in this same-sex marriage. So there is a lot of bureaucracy that is there now from the government side. There's a red tape from the government, you understand? So there is a need for government to do more in terms of recognition of some of these things, because it's not only the same-sex marriages, but also interracial marriages, where we also do have red tape from the government. So I can agree with him that those are the areas as well where the government needs to do more.
And Chuck, your take on this issue. Do you feel that the government actually has a role to play, and should they play a role with regards to changing the narrative in society, on the perception of mixed-race couples?
I do believe that the government always does have a role to play in the sense of teaching each other more about the different cultures and getting to know each other more can help us all be one, honestly. And honestly speaking, it's also up to us as individuals to go out there and make sure that we communicate about each other's cultures in a good manner. Like with my family, when they see someone, when I say my family, I'm talking about like aunts and uncles and grandparents. When they see my wife, they immediately think she's Chinese. But it is then up to me to say, no, she is not Chinese, she's Sikkimese, and then bring them to the light of who are these Sikkimese people, where do they come from. So as much as, yes, government does have a role to play, but it is also upon us individuals to teach each other about each other's cultures and each other's ways. And I feel like in that sense would be doing a greater deal, because unity does do justice for the world.
And now I actually want us to focus on the emotional impacts, the slight jibs that interracial couples receive at the malls, because we always tend to focus on the laws, legislations and getting things right by the book. But, you can only imagine how much of an emotional toll it takes on you, more especially when you start having kids, and then you have mixed race kids and they start attending school, and other kids at school they get looked very differently at. What's your take on the emotional toll that it has on you, your partner, and maybe if you do have kids?
Okay, first regarding kids, I have a daughter outside our relationship. That's with my past. And the mother of the child, she's half Sotho, half Indian. So I've already got a mixed race child there. And obviously people look at her in a strange way. It does hurt me a lot. The reason being, they don't look at her like she's a human being. They look at her like she's an object, or she's just something, an experiment. And it hurts a lot. Yeah, I'm not sure the way to move forward from that emotional thing. But like we've all been saying, we just have to brush it aside and keep our focus on that. We all need to unite. We all need to accept each other for who we are.
And your take, Mr. Diamond, because I mean, Tyrone is actually saying, the least he can do is brush it off. But how long can mixed-race couples keep brushing off matters? I mean, before it actually turns into a bigger matter.
So I think there's an aspect of dealing with adversity together as a couple. There's also an issue of understanding the old-fashioned people in the community. But most importantly now, it's an issue of having self-confidence. You would need to develop more to have probably, let's say, thick skin, to have self-confidence with regards to that. Probably I would say the same confidence that those in same-sex relationships have managed to develop, you understand, and claim that space. I might not have the experience that he has now. My experience was a little bit light, was still at varsity. It was accepted at varsity, you understand. So he's more into it. So I believe probably issues of self-confidence would also come into play. And also, that's where the government now has to come in and play a part. The part that it also has to play is with regards to social cohesion. There's a need that needs to be done in terms of social cohesion.
And your take, because, Tyrone also made mention that you've got a daughter, mixed-raced daughter. Yeah. How do we then start, roping in conversations on issues of color to young kids? What's your take on that?
Yeah, there can be an issue with regards to say which way, which path do we follow. But I believe as a couple, when two people are joined together, when two people are in a relationship, there are always different dynamics that they'll adapt to in terms of how to address those issues, which language to be spoken. But I believe the common language would be spoken, you understand? And I think as kids, you know, there's something special about kids. Kids adapt to the circumstances. They might not even understand what's going on. It's then the outside then which would come in and say, this is the issue. Like for instance, if you look at issues of people with albinism, you understand? The kids as they grew up, it's normal for them to grow up with that. It's the pressures coming out of the society which would then start pointing fingers to them and speaking ill against them.
I actually want us to talk, you know, about those external pressures, because I actually want us to actually go right on the root of the problem. How do we then prevent these external pressures, you know, from actually, you know, leading up or rather changing or shaping your kids who are mixed race, who also actually happen to be mixed race? But we also have another caller on the phone line from Soweto, who is Dumelo. A very good evening to you, Dumelo. Thank you so much for calling in. What's your comment for us this evening?
Hi, how are you, Mr.
I'm very well, thanks. And yourself, Dumelo, what's your comment for us?
Yes, see, I think this interracial relationships are very good. And then in a way that they create this belief that we are really a rainbow nation. But it's still not well received in terms of some other people of other race. Like, for an example, you may find that some white people are not okay with a white woman marrying a black person. And some black communities, they're also not happy with a black person marrying an Indian or a white person. And when you ask why they are against it, they don't have valid reasons. Some of them go as far as saying that people of other race, they will only come to black people only because they have money. Of which that is a problem. It's just a bad assumption to think people can only get married because some other ones have money and others don't have. So. But either way, I think it's a very good thing. In the rainbow nation, and then no race must create any barriers for us to fall in love.
Well, Dumelo, thank you so much for your time and for calling in this evening here on Africa Tonight. You know, I'm very glad that we had that caller, you know, especially on the issue of certain myths arising with regards to mixed race relationships. He's made mention that there's always a perception that black women will get married to white men because they supposedly have money. What's your take on that? Do you experience that? I'll also get your reaction on that as well.
Unfortunately, yes, I get that a lot. In reality, there are some of the ladies, black ladies, that do go for that. But I've come across a couple of them that actually don't. So it's a give and take. It's a 50-50 thing. Yeah, that's all I can say.
and your take, Mr. Diamond, but I actually want you to, you know, share some other myths that we might not know about that you actually experience, apart from the issue of people thinking that black women get attracted to white men because of money. But your reaction on those certain myths, Mr. Diamond?
We as people, we are programmed. We are programmed at a very young age to have certain myths and things that we believe in, you know. So we should not really cast aspersions on certain things, like what he's correctly saying, that we in the community, I'll say we, just to say, this is a general norm. This is a general pattern in understanding that if you see a black African woman getting married to an older white person, is because of the monetary gain that is there within the community. But there are many other dynamics which are involved in a relationship. Mind you, love is not the only underlying factor in a relationship. There are many other reasons why people go into a relationship.
But I actually want to also get Chuck's reaction on this. Chuck, I still hope that you can still hear me. We're actually discussing the issue of myths within mixed relationships. We just had a caller also joining us this evening who actually kind of dispelled this myth for us. Have you experienced some sort of perceptions with regards to you marrying, you know, a Sekamese lady or differently, you know, a woman of different color to that of yours?
Myself, I haven't come across that, but I have had my wife, every time she has had to, so to say, introduce me to someone when I'm not in the midst, where she says I'm black or I'm Shangaan. The most common thing people run to is the whole orientation of saying Shangans are known for the 1, 2, 3, of which, to me, it's a wrong thing to immediately think that she may be in the relationship for those. When I say 1, 2, 3, I'm obviously talking about sexual reasons. But for me, that doesn't make sense, because to her, she doesn't even know that, okay, around South Africa, generally, people speak like this of Shangans and Bendas or wherever else. But, you know, it's wrong to immediately bring it to that. She is in love with someone who she found to care for her and to be comfortable with. Now, like I myself, like I say, haven't come across that. So, but yes, I have come across where she would say so many times that when she says that she's in love with a Shangaan man, and people immediately make funny comments or say, ha, and stuff like that. But, you know, it's not something which I'm comfortable with, even hearing myself, you know.
Indeed. Well, we're also joined by another caller from Johannesburg, Dumi. A very good evening to you, Dumi. Thank you so much for your time. What's your comment for us this evening?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually Tyrone's girlfriend, and I've been following the conversation, and it's been very interesting. I just wanted to quickly touch on a few points with regards to culture. My sister's also in an interracial relationship, and she has a mixed-race child. And when it comes to their child, she's so beautiful. I love my niece. But she is lighter than her mom. So when she goes out with her mom, there are people who are constantly looking and are staring and are always taking pictures and asking a lot of questions like, whose baby is this? Who's this white baby belong to? So it can be difficult. But I was just listening to what Chuck was saying in terms of when people, you know, when they find out that you're in an interracial relationship, they start to make funny assumptions that, oh, you must be with him because he's white and he's rich, or you're going to get the land back for us. They make those kind of comments. And it can be hurtful. It also, I can say sometimes it depends where it's coming from. If you are friends with people and you're in a mutual friendship with everybody, you can take it as a joke and it can be funny. But there are some people who take it the wrong way and take it to the extremes, and it can be difficult. But it's like Tyrone and Mr. Diamond were saying earlier, as long as you are focused on each other, things like culture and the things that people say won't have such an effect on you. But yes, it can be difficult, but as long as you know that this is the perceptions that some people have, it is their perceptions and it has nothing to do with you. So you cannot let those perceptions define your relationship.
Well, Dumi, thank you so much for your comment this evening. Quite interesting, you know, a very turn into tonight's show. Your partner just called in.
Blushing.
And she actually... And she actually made mention of how much it actually hurts. You know, it's myths to us. We laugh about it. You know, we brush them off. But, you know, these myths actually play an emotional, you know, role on a person. How do you work, you know, going about dispelling some of those myths?
I use them as jokes. Like, there's one myth where they say white guys know how to romance. So I'll make sure that I really romance her. I teach her what romance is. So you just turn them into jokes. You turn them into positivity for the relationship.
And just a bit of closing comments from you, Diamond, and then I'll just quickly get your closing comments as well, Tyrone. But do you think that as a country, you know, as an entire continent, African continent, we can actually, you know, work towards really achieving proper inclusiveness, whether, you know, despite of race, despite of culture, you know, despite of all of those other factors that come to play?
The word that comes, or the phrase that comes to my mind, is social cohesion. We have an organization called Africa Diaspora Forum. They've been so vocal in terms of social cohesion, to say integrating people from different communities, you know, people from other parts of Africa into South Africa with issues of xenophobia, you know. So as long as Africa still has borders, as long as Africa still has those issues within the community, where there's issues of xenophobia, there's issues of undermining one another based on their relationship, based on tribe and so forth, we'll always be on the back foot as Africa. But I believe currently there is a lot that has been happening with regards to tradition and people changing, and only those small pockets within the tradition are rigid within tradition, and the less traveled, because mind you, once you travel, you are able to understand the issues of social cohesion because you go and interact with another culture. So I think as Africa, so far so good, but a lot can still be done. You know.
And your closing comments, Tyrone, the reception, with regards to gauging on our callers, they've been very warm with regards to the issue of mixed race couples. Just your closing comments on that.
Yeah, I like the fact that we all come to the same idea. I just think the government needs to do more, create more campaigns where not just the kids get involved, but their parents, their families get involved. You guys, they meet each other, they understand each other. I think we need to do that, and for us that we are in the relationship, we just need to keep our confidence high as well.
And actually, before we wrap up the show, Chuck, I have one last question for you. Do you have any advice towards new mixed-race couples or people who actually still wish, to engage themselves with other people of a different skin color to them? Okay, unfortunately, we've lost Chuck, but I'll actually take a Tyrone. What's your advice on that?
Sorry, you're going to have to repeat that.
What's your advice, towards people who actually wish or actually are, thinking of actually pursuing relationships with people of a different mixed color of them?
I think they need to take it as a very positive effect. They basically also educating Africans, they educating everyone internationally. So they need to follow the heart. They need to learn to brush off negative comments and just follow what they believe in, follow the language of love.
Well, Mr. Chadwa Diamond and Mr. Tyrone Smith, together with Mr. Chuck Vukosi, thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. And that is a wrap-up of this episode of Africa Tonight on Afro World View. For myself and the rest of the crew, thank you so much for staying with us.